Hi, this is Jake for BandLab, and in this video we're going to take a look at how to set levels in BandLab, and why setting levels is important. Learning to set levels is the first step to understanding how to mix efficiently, and it's essential for getting your tracks to sound their best. You can open this project yourself with the link in the video description, and if you find this guide useful, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be the first to know when new videos drop. When we talk about setting levels, we mean the relative volume levels of the tracks in your project. So let's look at setting levels in the context of making a track. I'd like to make a chilled hip-hop style track. I start by setting the project tempo to 100 BPM and the project key to F minor. First, I'm going to compose a beat. I add an instrument track and set the instrument to drum pads, boom bap classic. I put claps on the second and fourth beat, with kicks on the first, 7th, 8th, 10th, and 11th, 16th notes. I then put open hats on the first 7, 8th notes. I duplicate this bar out. You could duplicate notes and clips in BandLab by holding Option on Mac or Alt on Windows and dragging them over. The second time around, I add a cymbal crash on the last 8th note. I then duplicate these bars out to give me a 4-bar sequence. We can get a visual feedback on the volume level of our mix from the master volume fader, which has a colorful meter that shows the level of the master channel. Currently, this is creeping into the orange range, which shows we have a signal that's pretty loud, but nothing to worry about yet. Next, I add another instrument track, and this time I stick with the default grand piano instrument. I add an F minor 7 chord for 7 beats, followed by a C minor 7 chord for a beat. I duplicate this out too. Now when we play the project back, we can see that the meter is clipping, indicated by the volume level hitting the right-hand side, turning completely red, and leaving red warning indicators on the right-hand side of the meter that slowly disappear. As you might imagine from this display, clipping the master track can be a problem. However, we can't hear any audible distortion yet, so I'm going to carry on adding some more elements. Next, I add an instrument track and set it to electric basses, 62P bass. I sequence a bass line that plays F, A flat, and F. The master meter is now going red even more often, but we're still not really hearing too much audible distortion, so let's add another instrument. This time I'm going for lead Gfunk sign. I program in a lead line that plays F, F, E flat, A flat, F, and C. Let's hear how it sounds. Okay, now we can definitely hear distortion. We know that this distortion isn't inherent to the Gfunk sign patch, because if we solo and listen to it on its own, it sounds nice and smooth. So what's happening here? Earlier, I mentioned that the master meter going red indicates that the master track is clipping. When we play the project back, the signals of the individual tracks are added together, giving us what we call the master output. This master output has a finite ceiling, and when the output signal exceeds this value, the information is lost or clipped. A very small amount of clipping won't result in audible distortion, but a significant amount of clipping will result in the type of distortion we've just heard. As well as causing distortion, clipping means you're losing dynamic range, which is generally something you want to avoid before a track is mastered. So how do we avoid clipping? We could simply turn down the master track's volume level. This is useful if you're experiencing just a small amount of clipping at the end of a project when you're happy with the balance of your mix. The balance of a mix means the relationship between the volume levels of the various tracks. Our mix arguably doesn't have a very good balance because the Gfunk sine lead is very loud, and the bass and drums are on the quiet side for a hip hop style beat. Let's return the master to its original level and try a different approach. I'm going to turn all the track's volume levels down to infinity dB. dB stands for decibels, which is a unit we use to measure the relative loudness of sounds. We don't talk about volume levels as absolute values. It's always relative to something else. Decibels are ratios that work on a logarithmic scale, and while that sounds complex, it's really not too bad. A value of 0 dB means a sound's original volume level. At minus 6 dB, the sound has half the amplitude. At minus 12 dB, it has a quarter of the amplitude. At minus 18 dB, it has an eighth of the amplitude, and so on. At infinity dB, the sound is silent. So a value of infinity dB means we just turn a track all the way down. As this is a hip-hop style beat, I want the drums to be the main focus of the mix. Let's set the drum track to minus 6 dB, so half of its original amplitude. To fine-tune faders in BandLab, we can hold Shift, which makes it easier to get specific values. The starting level will give us more headroom in the mix, which means that we have more room to add elements in the mix before we start clipping the master. The downside is that for the moment at least, our mix will be quieter. Next, I'm going to mix the bass back in. I feel a level of minus 6 dB works well. This is 0.5 dB quieter relative to how we had it before when everything was at 0 dB. But if I decide it's too quiet, I can go back and change it later. Now let's bring the piano back in. I'm going to set this at minus 14 dB, which is quieter than what we had it before, which means that the beats and bass sound more powerful in the mix. But it's not so quiet that it sounds too weak, and it's just loud enough to still help drive the groove of the track. Now it's time to bring the Gfunk sine back in. Here I'm going for a level of minus 23.5 dB, which is much, much quieter than what we had it originally. But at this level, it's still very audible without sounding weak, and the beats and bass are still able to punch through the mix. So now we have a much better sounding mix with no distortion. It's not as loud as it was before, but if you'd like to make it louder, you can simply turn up the master track level. Just be careful that you don't clip the master. To export your mix, select File, Download, Mix Down As. You could fork this project and make your own version of it using the link in the video description. Have fun!